Good afternoon to everyone joining us. I think we're just waiting for all of our numbers to creep up to capacity. And then Georgie, will you say a few intro words and then we'll kick off when we've got everyone.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by ECIS. ECIS is the Educational Collaborative of International Schools, established for 55 years as a not-for-profit organisation. We have over 500 members in 78 countries. My name is Georgie McIntyre, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's webinar. ECIS are proud to partner with Pearson to provide you with this webinar today. We will be sharing a recording of today's webinar, and there will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions via the chat box, and I think also through the sessions. Please let me introduce our experts today who are joining us. Firstly, we have Ashley Lodge, who is the Mental Health and Wellbeing Product Lead for UK schools at Pearson, and also oversees Pearson's staff mindfulness programme. He has been practicing mindfulness since 2013 and trained as a mindfulness teacher in 2016. He holds a degree in philosophy, if I put my teeth in, from Southampton University, and a PGCE from Cambridge University. He's joined here today by his co-teacher, Wren. For a learning ecosystem to be truly effective, it needs to prioritise student and staff wellbeing alongside academic achievement and quality teaching. And in this webinar with Pearson's mindfulness leader, we will now explore this further. Please join me in thanking and welcoming Ashley and Lisa. Handing over to you both.
Thank you very much for the intro, Georgie, and lovely to be with you all today, wherever you are in the world. Lisa and I have done a few of these over the last couple of months, obviously in response to everything we're going through with coronavirus. So it's lovely to be here today, tell you a bit about mindfulness, and to make sure that this hour is actually for you. So a couple of some things, some kind of guide rules before we begin. In order to get the most out of the session, we invite you to please turn off your phones, to put them to silent or airplane mode. If you've got any other screens open on your laptop in front of you, you might want to close them or minimize them. This will help reduce distraction, because a lot of what we do in mindfulness is around reducing distraction. So again, if you've got any other notifications that come up, just allow yourself to turn these off, to allow yourself to be fully present and to have this time for your own mental health and well-being. Because as many of you, I imagine, are teachers or in roles, maybe also as parents, we're in roles of responsibility of looking after and helping other people around us. So having this hour for your own mental health and well-being is really important. We understand if you're looking after children, and we hope that you can participate as fully as possible. Although this course is obviously directed mainly at adults, the children are more than welcome to join us for the meditation bit that we're going to be doing towards the end. And finally, safeguarding. If you feel that stress, anxiety, or low mood are having a real impact on your life at the moment, then always remember that there are friends and family and many other support organisations that are there to help provide support, especially during what at the moment can be very unsettling times. So like I was saying a moment ago, is that this next hour really is as much for you. We're going to talk a lot about the science and the neuroscience and the psychology behind mindfulness, and we're going to do a practice. But we talk very much when Lisa and I run this course about the oxygen mask approach, that before you can help others, what's really important is that you look after yourself. And just as when you're going through the security briefing before takeoff on a plane, they always talk about the importance of, if the pressure in the cabin reduces and the oxygen mask drops down, put your own oxygen mask on first before you put it on of those around you. And so it's the same for mental health and well-being. We, as practitioners, as people that provide mental health and well-being support for people, we're no good if we don't look after ourselves. And I imagine that many of you attending today's webinar will be in that situation. So use this hour as much for your own mental health as well, and well-being as for those around you. So what we're going to cover in today's session, it will be an hour. So a bit about who we are and how we came to mindfulness, because I always think it's really important for presenters and people that talk about mindfulness. It's a very much a lived-in experience. So talking about how we came to it, I think, is an important part of why we do what we do today. We're going to explain what mindfulness is, so we've all got a common definition of it. How it's helping in schools, what's being done in schools currently, and what some of the academic research is showing us about how it can help. And I'm looking particularly here about teacher mental health and well-being in particular, probably a bit more so than pupil mental health, but we can talk a bit more about that at the end. Like I said earlier, we're going to explore the psychology and the neuroscience behind the practice, so everyone understands why we do the practices that we do. And then we're going to do a practice, and you'll hear me use the word practice, but I will use this probably interchangeably with the word meditation. Some people prefer the word practice, other people prefer the word meditation. I'll use them interchangeably. And then finally, if we have some time at the end, we'll do a quick Q&A. And I may, if time permits, pause for some questions if they come up. So if there's any questions or anything that you feel needs a little bit of explanation, please put them in the chat or Q&A function. Georgie and Lisa will be monitoring these throughout, and then if anything big comes up, we can pause just to help explain if something's unclear. Okay, so a little bit about us then. So I'll start off and then I'll hand over to Lisa. So a bit about me. As explained earlier, I work on mental health and wellbeing products for UK schools here at Pearson, and I also lead on the staff programme. There's a little photo of me in case you don't think I am who I say I am. My journey to mindfulness started in 2013. My GP recommended it to me because I'd been having quite bad bouts of anxiety. And I was very fortunate to get on the 8-week mindfulness course here in the Oxford Mindfulness Centre, which is very fortunate. It's just down the road from me here in Oxford, probably about 10 minutes by bike, actually. And I've been practicing it ever since. It was a real game changer for me, a real life changer for me, and how it helped reduce and deal with and manage my own anxiety better. We had a big drive on mental health and wellbeing in Pearson schools in the UK. And so I ran several course pilots using the book of the course I'm going to talk to you about later. And then eventually I trained up as a mindfulness teacher in 2016. And I've been running Pearson UK's mindfulness program since 2017, so for 3 years now. And over that period, we've seen nearly 700 of our colleagues come through with our main program, which is a 6-week program that we offer here. I'm also a coach and part of Pearson's Well UK group. That's our big mental health and wellbeing group for staff. And over to Lisa.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everybody. So I'm Lisa. My day job, unlike Ashley, my day job is completely different from this. So I manage intellectual property and rights for Pearson globally. But I've been practicing mindfulness since around 2011. In response really to a burnout due to stress and overwork and a bit of anxiety as well. So I was introduced to it, and same as Ashley, I haven't looked back. It made a real difference to my life, and I've been practicing it for many years. And I trained as a mindfulness teacher in 2017 and have been supporting Ashley since then, and we've delivered lots and lots of courses to Pearson employees very successfully. So my academic background, different to my work background, is in psychology and neuroscience, and as well as mindfulness teaching at Pearson, I also provide some stress management classes for employees, and I've just started my master's in health psychology. So that's me.
I don't know how Lisa does it all. I think it's through Lisa's mindfulness practice that she managed to do both her day job and her MSc on top. So, and thank you, Lisa, so much for giving up your time today to help me with this. It's greatly appreciated.
Pleasure.
Okay. So what is mindfulness then? It's a really current buzz term. Everyone's heard about it, but it's really important that we have a unified definition of it. And the definition that I like to use the most, that I think encapsulates the key essence of it, is that of the founder of mindfulness in the West, Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he says it is paying attention in a particular way, that is on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So let's just explore those three constituent bits. On purpose, what is our intention behind what we're doing? Because our intention forms where we place our attention. So it's really important that we're clear. When we're practicing mindfulness, we're very clear about our intention, and where we're going to focus our attention. And you'll see that later when we do a practice together, how we move our attention around from our breath to various parts of our body to help ground us and focus in the present moment, which takes me to the second constituent bit. We can only really be fully present in the present moment because the past is done and the future is yet to come. And unless we can invent some kind of time travel, which I'm not aware we can do at the moment, but you never know what Elon Musk might be able to rustle up next, we are very much in the present moment. So it's an invitation to keep coming back to the present moment. It's the only moment in which we can be fully present, have some sense of control or mastery over. And then finally, non-judgmentally. We as a species have survived all these millions of years because we have to make split-second judgments on all the sensory information coming to us to know whether it might be a threat to our existence. Trouble is, when we're constantly judging everything that comes to us, we can end up sometimes spinning out false stories that can create issues and can sometimes exacerbate low mood or anxiety. So our invitation in mindfulness is to be non-judgmental, to stand back and be aware of all the information coming to us, but to have a pause before we might want to rush in and start judging what's going on. It's important to also say what mindfulness isn't. It isn't a relaxation method, although I imagine that when we do the practice later on, that some of you, many of you will feel relaxed, but that's a nice additional benefit. It's not the goal of mindfulness, if you like. Nor is it about emptying the mind. Now, there are certain meditative traditions where people do that, but as you can imagine, we teach in corporate settings or educational settings, and therefore it's actually about how we can better organize our mind, not empty the mind. It's not about achieving a state of bliss. I'm sure there probably are some gurus out there. I don't really float around in a big white flowy robe, getting people to put flowery garlands around my neck and waving joss sticks. That's not what we do. There are, again, traditions that do that, and that works for people, but very much in our corporate setting, that's not what it's about. Nor is it a panacea. It's not like aspirin or paracetamol. It's not something that you can just take and you pop and the pain goes away. Mindfulness is about how we can have a look at a different relationship with us and the world and what's going on around us and when we might feel good or less good. So it's not a quick fix or sticking plaster. It takes time and effort, and most people that come to mindfulness will do something like an 8-week course to really go through and understand all the neuroscience and psychology underpinning it. And finally, it's important to say that it isn't a replacement for counselling or therapy. Very often it can be used in conjunction or can be used after counselling or therapy has helped ascertain what might be going on for someone. So why is mindfulness important for school communities in particular then? What we know is that staff mental health and wellbeing is key to a school's success for both teachers and pupils. And that teachers who have a better sense of well-being and happiness are more likely to stay at that school, and their teaching will be more impactful. Teachers who understand pupils' mental health and well-being issues are more likely to be able to offer the right kind of support when pupils come to them for it. And then finally, when mindfulness is taught to pupils who are equipped with such skills, the right kind of mental health skills, are more likely to be resilient and then also probably have less distractions to learning. So what is the kind of the type of mindfulness? Because there are a few different schools of mindfulness. So John Kabat-Zinn, who I mentioned about in my slide a couple of slides ago, he very much brought some of the kind of key essences out of Buddhist practice, and he wanted to see how those more meditative traditions, how meditation could be used for people to deal with long-term pain conditions. And he founded the Stress Reduction Clinic at the University of Massachusetts Hospital in Boston in the States. And this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. He published lots of different reports about how people were being helped to deal with their pain conditions. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists said, what if we could take this mindfulness approach and merge it with cognitive behavioral therapy to actually help people who are suffering from relapsing depression, who cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT wasn't being efficacious enough. So these three psychologists formed together what's called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And the curriculum that Lisa and I use is written by one of those three founding psychologists, Mark Williams, who was the director of the Oxford Mindfulness Centre here at the University of Oxford. He's now stepped down from it. But the book he wrote has formed the basis of the curriculum that we teach, and it's called Finding Peace in a Frantic World. And it's very much the layperson's, if you like, the public access curriculum that's used. There is a slightly different curriculum that is used for people that are using it to help with recurrent depression. But MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, that fusion of mindfulness practice and cognitive behavioral therapy, is fully grounded in neuroscience and psychology and has been through many rigorous studies. Now, I think it was the PREVENT study that I think, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong here, that was done back in 2007, which was a landmark study here in the UK, which basically looked at people who are on Prozac-style drugs for recurrent depression, and it wanted then to move a group across to then look to see if their remission could be maintained on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy approaches. And they found that it was just as efficacious. So MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, was found to be just as efficacious in helping people deal with recurrent depression 3 episodes or more as Prozac-style drugs, as SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And that's when, certainly in the UK, mindfulness really kind of took off. It became a media sensation. And that's probably, and there are probably lots of different international studies, and if you want, Lisa and I can probably find them afterwards, but this is the main one. And the book has been translated into lots of different languages. I think it's available globally and has all of the landmark studies that form part of it. So I wholly recommend that book, because it's the book which forms the curriculum of the courses that we teach at Pearson and have used for the staff courses I've done as well for teachers. A little bit of some of the academic research now. So we found that in studies that MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, the other form of mindfulness that John Kabat-Zinn created, is been found to help improve attention and working memories of teachers. And Lisa and I have seen this actually a lot of time. We've certainly seen attention increases. We don't look at working memory when we do our staff courses, but it's been shown time and time again to help with that. Because a lot of what we're doing in mindfulness is really looking at that sustained attention. Like I said, where do we place our intention? Focus is where we place our attention. And as you'll see in a bit later on when we talk about the brain, we'll find out about the prefrontal cortex, which is highly linked to memory. So our working memory can go up as a result too. And also job-related performance goes up as well. So there are different studies, this one by Fluke and another one by Jennings, show that actually there has been improved kind of classroom management after modified MBSR training. And Lisa and I, as I've said, have been roughly about 700 people that have been through mainly our 6-week program. We do slightly different versions, but the 6-week mindfulness-based cognitive therapy program is the one we teach, is a slightly boiled down one of the Frantic World curriculum. And these are kind of the results we see. This is a cohort of about 100 people that came through the course in 2018. And we're seeing in that 6-week course a drop in anxiety of about 45%, a drop in stress of about 20%, and an increase of attention and focus of around and just above 25%. And we've replicated these results lots and lots of times, and they back up a lot of the academic research that's currently out there at the moment. And finally, before we get in to talk a bit more about the science and the neuroscience and the psychology, last year I was invited by our colleagues in Pearson, Italy, who were working with the Italian Ministry of Education, and I ran a 4-week mindfulness intro, so very much intro to the basics of mindfulness. And I ran this 4-week pilot course, 2 courses, one in Italian, one in English. And we've been crunching all the data. Lisa is writing up the report as we speak, and we hope to publish that later on this summer. And again, the results that we've seen there have been very, very encouraging, very similar to the results that I've shared with you earlier. And so we had about 65 teachers that attended for that, and it was great to get both the anecdotal feedback and their data to really see how mindfulness was really beneficial to them for their own mental health and well-being. And then, of course, the next stage is how can we then educate them to then teach mindfulness onto pupils. But in the first wave or phase of this program, it's very much about educating the teachers so that when they're educated in mindfulness and they can use it themselves, then we can educate them in using it with pupils. So watch this space on the report that should be out later this year about that. Okay, I'm just going to pause there for a moment before we go into the science behind mindfulness, and just see if there's any questions at all.
There was only one, Ashley, and that was just the master's course that I'm on is actually health psychology for the person who asked that. So it's a combination of psychology and impact on behaviour change, mental and physical health.
Okay.
But nothing else has come through, so I think all is clear.
Good. Okay, thank you. Right, so on to the science behind mindfulness then. So I'm going to hand over to Lisa, because this is her field of expertise, and she's going to talk a bit about the brain and how mindfulness rewires our brain in positive, better ways.
Thanks, Ashley. And apologies, my neighbours are having some work done and have just decided to start angle grinding, I think, next door. So if there's some noise, I do apologise, the perils of working at home in lockdown. So yeah, rewiring the brain. So there's been a lot of academic studies, both in the field and in the laboratory, around what happens when we practice mindfulness. And there's two key areas of the brain that are impacted. And let's talk a little bit first about the older, evolutionarily older piece of the brain, which is the limbic brain. And this really responds to stressful events. So this is the part of the brain that really kicks in when we feel anger or worry or frustration or fear, any kind of perceived threat. Then that part of the brain is really going to take over, and that's what makes us feel that kind of anxiety or fear. It's a very, very powerful response indeed, and it's all to do with survival. So it's a very strong, one of the strongest responses that we have as human beings. And then the other part of the brain is a parasympathetic nervous system. This is the newer part of the brain in the prefrontal cortex. And this is the area of the brain that helps to calm us down. So it responds to calming activities and calming thoughts and moods, feelings of contentment, confidence, safety. And that really helps to calm the body and to relax us. So these two different parts of the brain completely work together. They should be in good balance. So when we feel threat, the limbic part kicks in, and then when the threat's passed, the prefrontal cortex, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. And what we see with mindfulness practice through fMRI studies is that there's reduced activity in the limbic region of the brain with a sustained and regular mindfulness practice. And at the same time, increased connectivity in the prefrontal cortex, so that front part of the brain, the newer part of the brain. And that's really important. Connectivity means greater efficiency in the brain, and it's a good thing for the brain to have. So that's what the studies have shown, and it's through a process called neuroplasticity, which unfortunately we don't have time to talk about in depth today, but do look it up, because it's a fascinating concept, and one that has got a lot of evidence around that now, that the brain can change. And when we practice mindfulness, these are the kind of changes that we see, which are great.
Brilliant, thank you. I've seen a question come in about what strategies do you have to help skeptical teachers. So I think we park that, and hopefully let's see if some of this webinar helps answer that, and then we can come back to that then. So let's keep that question in the back of our minds for later on. Thank you for sending that, and thank you, Lisa, for that explanation. Now, when we're teaching in classrooms, what I always explain to my students is that actually that idea of rewiring the brain, it's a bit like going to the gym. Now, at the moment, we can't go to gyms here in the UK. They've been closed since we've been in lockdown. So I dusted down my weights, took this picture of them. I have used them a couple of times since lockdown. I need to start using them again. But what I always explain to my students is when you go to a gym, you get your PT will guide you as to give you a program as to what you'll need to do, and explain that they'll find the right weights for you, and they'll get you to lift those weights probably 3 or 4 times a week. And by doing that, what you'll do is you'll tear the muscle fibers and gradually build those biceps. At least that's what I'm trying to do eventually. And it's a bit like that with mindfulness. What we're doing is every time we do a meditation or a practice, what we're doing is we're rewiring our brain. We know from studies, both from studies like this, getting the psychological data we shared with you earlier, but also fMRI, we can put people into fMRI, magnetic resonance imagery, before and after mindfulness courses to see how there can be an increased amount of activity in the prefrontal cortex and reduced activity in and around the amygdala, the stressy bit of the brain. And so going to the gym, lifting those weights, tears those muscle fibers. Mindfulness is a bit like the gym for the brain. you're rewiring those brains and making those more neural connections in the calmer, wiser bit of your brain at the front, the prefrontal cortex. But it takes time and effort. It takes that dedication. And we know as little as 10 minutes a day of mindfulness practice or meditation can make the difference. So a bit about the psychology behind mindfulness now. So what makes up mindfulness? There are three constituent bits. There's the psychological principles, or the psychoeducation, and we're going to get to talk to you about the key components of that shortly. Then there is formal practice. Formal practice, like I said earlier, also is the other way of explaining meditation. And there are different meditations we do. Most of them, to start off with, are attentional based. So they're very much about bringing your attention to simple things like breath or your body. Sometimes they might be more open monitoring, where you might be invited to observe and monitor your thoughts coming and going without interacting with them. Other times it might be repeating key phrases, such as when we do the befriending practice, and then looking and feeling what might be going on in the body as a result. But it's best experienced, and that's why we're going to do a practice together at the end of this, because we want you to experience it. That's when we best understand what practice means. And then finally, we have everyday mindfulness. Everyday mindfulness are those simple things, and we're going to talk a bit about them later on, where we do something like mindfully making a cup of tea, boiling the water, adding in the tea bag, watching it brew, adding in the milk, watching the color change, feeling the warmth of the cup in our hand. When we come to simple everyday tasks, like walking out in the sun, and feeling the sun and the warmth on your skin, and just being present in that moment, that's a form of everyday mindfulness. When we have all of those three combined things, then we have better self-awareness, better self-management, and happier, calmer, more focused people. Now, I'm aware that people are putting hands up and asking questions, but because of the interest of time, if you can just type your question, and then we'll group them and come to the end. Otherwise, we won't be able to get through everything. So please do that, and then we will endeavour to get back to you. So what's really key to explain in terms of the psychology is, in mindfulness, we say there are two different modes of mind. Our brains, our minds exist in these two different modes: doing mode and being mode. Now, doing mode gets things done. And sometimes it's called doing driven mode, because it is very much goal orientated. It always drives us on to do stuff. And that's great. It's great that we wouldn't get stuff done without doing mode. You know, as human beings, we're often more human doings than human beings. And being mode is that invitation to come to something that feels like changing gear, that feels like a real different mental shift, to be in the moment. So let's go through some of those kind of type of behaviors that characterize doing mode. Very much it's done on autopilot. We spend a lot of time analyzing data, analyzing our emotions. We strive for the world to be a certain way, but very often it might not be, certainly at the moment. In doing mode, we see thoughts as solid and real. When we encounter problems, we might avoid them. It can reflect a lot on the past and think a lot about the future, but might not be present, focused, aware. And very often it just gets into repetitive activities that can sometimes be quite depleting, and we might not be aware of it. When we do our mindfulness practice and the education of the psychology behind it, we're educating people into what it means to enter into being mode. And when we enter into being mode, here are some of the characteristics of being mode. That very often when we're in being mode, we consciously choose how we want to be in that moment, rather than having automatic responses, automatic reactions to people and situations. Very often we learn on how we can come back to sensing in our body. So it's a returning to the body, because we live so much of our lives up here. We forget how our bodies can be very sensitive radars for our emotional lives. And actually we're going to have great emotional intelligence by returning to our bodies and feeling what's going on, because sometimes that can give us an early warning sign before we might even be consciously aware of what's going on. It invites us to accept that the world might not be the way we want it to be right now. And a lot of us are having to practice some form of social distancing or various forms of isolation, and that can be quite hard. But accepting that can take off some of the additional pressure, rather than wanting the world to be the way we want it to be. We're invited to see thoughts as mental events rather than an objective version of reality, because our thoughts can be changed by how much wine we might have had last night, how much sleep we might have had, whether we might have had lots of emails and stressful meetings. All of those colour our thinking and our judgment. We're invited to approach problems rather than avoid them. We come back to the present moment, because it's the only moment we can be in. And we look and weigh up our lives to see, are we doing enough nourishing, kind things to ourselves to make life, even when it might feel difficult, that every moment can be as worth it, and we can be as okay with it as we possibly can. So we're going to go through some examples now of ways that we can shift into being mode, and what people would probably learn on something like a 6 or an 8 week course. So what we're giving you today is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the things, and these may resonate for you. It'd be interesting to get your reflections at the end on these. So when we come off autopilot, what are the different ways that we can learn to come off autopilot? So in each of the classes, we teach kind of techniques, and there's always specific meditations related to them. But when we're talking about it, very often we hear about how people do so much in automatic mode because it's like the energy saving mode of brain. But if we're not in those moments, like when I was on the park walking around at the beginning of lockdown when spring had just arrived, I wouldn't have properly been in that moment to see the trees budding and to fully appreciate what it is to be in that moment, and just to enjoy that, and to come off just automatically walking around and getting to my house. When I make a drink like my coffee in the morning, to come off autopilot rather than just making it and drinking it, to be there, to experience it, to smell it, to taste it, allows me to come off those automatic behaviors and to fully be in that moment and appreciate it and live it and experience the rich tapestry of all my thoughts and feelings and emotions and senses that are going on in that moment. I talked about how we want to move to accepting how things are right now. At the moment, schools are only just reopening in the UK, and only then just a few year groups. And so very often we have to accept that at the moment, life isn't going to be as it is going to be normally, and that normality might take a long time to return in the way we knew it as. We can either resist that and get ourselves all the more wound up, or we can accept that at the moment we might have to work from home on our tabletops, with our laptops going, with partners in the house. And when we allow ourselves to just say, it's okay to be here right now, we take off that pressure and we allow ourselves to come back. And that actually gives us a calmer, wiser response. We enter back into being mode and away from doing mode, which drives us on, even sometimes not in the most healthy, calmest ways. I talked earlier about, actually, I realized I put my coffee in twice. That probably says a lot about how much I like my coffee. But again, when you're making a drink or something like that, it's engaging all of the senses through simple actions. I did have a better image for this, which was different people holding up different things to represent all the senses. So what can you do around engaging all of your senses in everything that you're doing? The practices that we do in the middle of mindfulness are actually around how we invite people to really return to their bodies, to sense and use their bodies as a radar for what might be going on. So sensing is very, very important, and really enjoying of food. When we do mindful eating, we do a very simple exercise with a raisin, and we get people just to taste all the different sensations and see all the different sensory information that we get from something as simple and as small as a raisin. And when people do that exercise, I think it's a bit daft and silly to start off with, but all the various things that we learn from it are huge. And it's ironic that it can come from something so small. As I was saying earlier, we need to stand back from seeing our thoughts as solid and real, and see them more as mental events. So sometimes feeling like you're looking for a telescope, so you can see your emotions and you can get a bit of a clarity. You know, sometimes when you're so up close to things, you can't easily get that kind of perspective. And thoughts might draw you in to automatic responses, to stressful responses. When you can take a step back from your thoughts, you can help to get a bit more objectivity and clarity. When Lisa and I teach this, we use an analogy. We get people to envisage walking down the street and they see their mate, they wave at them and their mate doesn't wave back. And we get them to say, what were the thoughts that came up? What were the emotions that came up? What was going on for you? And very often people can spin out a whole story that actually might have just come from fear and anxiety, than having no basis in reality. When we can stand back, we can start to see how some of the stories we spin out can be anxious stories and can be unhelpful stories that can only compound when we might feel bad about things. Sitting with our emotions. When it comes to dealing with difficulty, very often we might circle and we might avoid them. Mindfulness gives us an invitation to actually sit there, even when our emotions might feel turbulent and difficult. And it invites us to return to our bodies and to sense where we might be feeling those emotions. We have lots of phrases in the English language about, I had a lump in my throat for something that felt sad or emotional. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe if you see someone you really like, or something really really important or exciting happened, or had butterflies in my tummy if you're a bit nervous about it. Sitting with those emotions and those feelings where they occur in the body can allow you just to be okay with them, even when they might feel difficult. Because mindfulness is not about creating this sense of rose-tinted glasses. It's about saying, how can we be okay during the good times and the bad? And I call him the Irish philosopher, songwriter, Ronan Keating, when I say, when he's saying, life is a roller coaster, you just got to ride it. And mindfulness is saying, actually, this is your security belt. This is that bar that keeps you on the roller coaster, so that when it's going up and down, you're going to stay in your carriage and you're going to be okay with it. It doesn't say life's going to be a bed of roses, but what it can help you is to be okay with the good times and the bad times, and weather that storm better, and hopefully make the roller coaster a bit less like that and a bit more gentle. And finally, what we do towards the end of the course is we get people to really evaluate what are the things they do in their lives. And maybe you can have a think for a moment. What are the things that you do in your lives that nourish you, that you enjoy? Is it doing photography? Is it sitting on the sofa and reading your favorite book with a cup of coffee? Is it watching your child doing some painting when you've made sure you've covered all the furniture and the carpet, lest it be sprayed with paint, as often happens at my sister's house when my niece and nephew get going? So what are all those things that you do that nourish you, that give you a real sense of enjoyment, things that you do for yourself as well as your children and your pupils? And what are the things that sometimes you might do in autopilot that you just do because you've always done them and maybe are less helpful? And maybe you're not doing enough of the things that actually nourish you and give you back that joie de vivre. So have a think about that, and it's an invitation to say, by entering being mode, it's looking after yourself, it's doing those nice things for you. It's really, really important. And some people have some real revelations when we get them to make a list of all the things that are all the things they do and label them nourishing or depleting. And then we have some really good talks in our classes about that. So maybe make a list for yourself and maybe write down all the things you do on a daily or weekly basis, and are they nourishing or depleting? And is the balance right? Because some are going to be nourishing, some are depleting. Okay, so those are some examples, just extrapolating out those kind of being mode behaviors and how we want to shift from more doing mode behaviors into being mode. That's not to say that we don't want there's got to be doing mode behaviors. We all got to do stuff in our lives, but we want to make sure we get that balance right. Because when we get that balance of doing and being mode behaviors, it's like what Lisa was saying earlier about that balance between the limbic brain, that flight or fight response, which looks after our survival, but can be very stimulated at this moment in time with a lot of anxiety, and then getting that balance of that calmer, wiser thing to say, actually, it's okay. Things are okay right now. I can see a bit of a picture as to what's going on. So how can mindfulness help us then, as teachers, as parents, as carers? How can it help us? It can help us deal better with our emotions. We can observe thoughts, feelings, and sensations by standing back, as I was saying earlier, getting that objectivity. But what's really important in mindfulness, we talk a lot about treating ourselves with a sense of kindness and compassion and decency. Very often we can be our own worst enemies because we're constantly driving ourselves on to do things and to do things for others, and we don't look after ourselves. When we are kind and decent to ourselves, then I bet your bottom dollar we are kinder and more decent to other people around us. We can learn how to turn down those automatic stress or anxiety responses. A lot of us will be facing elevated anxiety levels because of coronavirus. And that can mean when something more anodyne or inane happens that might slightly niggle with us, it can fire us off. So mindfulness gives us that invitation to keep returning to be calm, to knowing that it's okay that our anxiety might be elevated at the moment, but when we feel it kick in, we can use breath to calm and anchor us. And like I said, accepting how things are right now, learning to moving away from striving and say, I wish the way the world was like this. We all do. I wish I could go out and see all my friends and give them a big hug. At the moment, I'm only allowed 6 of them in my garden, and that's an improvement from what it was. And different parts of the world, different social distancing rules are in place at the moment. But when I just accept that that's how things are for now, it takes off that artificial pressure which can very often only confound our own problems. And finally, it's certainly in an educational setting, it helps reduce distraction. When we can reduce distraction, we can be more present, and therefore we can actually switch on the bit of our brain around learning, that memory, that emotional flexibility, that cognitive flexibility. It builds those neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex. All great stuff for that. Okay, before we get onto the 10-minute practice, I'll pause very quickly for questions. I can take a couple now, and then we shall push on with our practice to make sure we have Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
Lisa, what did we have? I've seen a few things pop up.
Yeah,
in the Q&A.
so we've had some questions, and they're mainly actually about how we can help people to deliver mindfulness. So maybe just the first one, how a teacher can train students to become more mindful, and how long it takes to affect a mindfulness practice would take to affect a child. And this is something that we say that actually teaching mindfulness requires training. And actually, I don't know if you want to say a bit more about that, but we do need to be careful, particularly with the young brain. As we all know, brains are not really fully developed until around the age of 20, and there's a lot of stuff happening in there, and mindfulness is a psychological intervention, so we do need to take care.
Thank you. I think that's an important. We'll just take that one now, and I'll say yes, it's very important. First of all, anyone, people need to learn and do an 8-week, ideally a 6 or 8 week mindfulness course for themselves first. They need to really understand it, have gone through it, seen how it works for them, and probably have around 6 months to a year of their own personal practice to see that mindfulness resonates, because anyone who's teaching mindfulness has to embody the practice, to do the daily practice, to embody those principles. And then you enlist on a teacher training program. In the UK, we have a great organization called MISP, Mindfulness in Schools Project, and they have teacher training programs. They have .B and .pause, which are training programs for primary and secondary. Pause is the one for primary, .B is the one for secondary. They do teacher training programs that I think are probably just under a week. At Pearson, we're looking about what we can do in that offering too. At the moment, and I'll talk to you at the end, I've just launched in Italy, actually, the 4-week online mindfulness course, which is a teacher training program. It's the online teacher training program of the one I did at the Ministry of Education. But please always make sure that you yourself aren't offering it unless you're a fully qualified and trained mindfulness practitioner. And we'll talk a bit more about the end. If you're going to get third parties into your school, you make sure they are properly trained. Safeguarding and looking after mental health and well-being is absolutely paramount, as Lisa said. And it's not just a case of I want to start using this with my pupils. It really has to be done properly. We'll pause there because we're going to do the practice together now, because I want just under 10 minutes for that, and then we'll look at questions at the end. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to get into a correct posture. I'm going to explain that. And we're going to do a practice, breath and body. It's a very simple beginner's type practice we do in mindfulness. And we're going to be, if we start off in the top left, it's very much around directing the spotlight of attention. We're going to start off by directing that to the breath. And then we're going to move from the breath to the body. You'll be invited to then shift the attention down to the feet, and we'll work up through some major parts of our body just to see if we can keep the focus of the attention in those different parts of our body. That takes us down to the bottom left. Our mind will wander throughout this. That's natural. The journey of mindfulness begins when we realize that our attention has been in the right place and then it's wandered. And when it wanders away, we bring it back. We bring it back. We wake up to where the mind has gone to. It's like an alarm clock, alarm bell ringing to come back to where we've been asked to go. Now, why is there a picture of a puppy in the middle? This is because if you've ever trained a puppy, you treat it with kindness and compassion. You don't berate the puppy, because the puppy will probably only get upset. It's the same with our brain. What we know from psychology is what resists persists. When you are kinder and more decent to yourself in your own monologue, you yourself will be able to learn it. It switches on learning better. So let's do that practice now. I'm going to see, because we're nearly at 1:45, I'm going to do it for just under 10 minutes. So in order to do this properly, what you need to do is to get into correct posture. So ideally, sit upright in a straight back chair, ankles, knees and hips at right angles, and your back, if you want, just sitting it slightly in front of the chair back, or if you get a bad back like me, you can have your back supported. That's equally fine. And then when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And if at all during this practice you feel lightheaded, if you've never done it, then you're absolutely fine to open your eyes just to ground yourself back in the present moment. There's absolutely no problem with that. But the invitation is, as best you feel comfortable, to close the eyes and just start off with a moment of becoming aware of the room that you're sat in. Maybe the ticking of a clock or any other noises that may be going on around, and just accept whatever they are right now. Because in a moment, I'm going to ask you to turn the focus, the attention inwards. And with the next in-breath, really feeling all of the sensation where the breath enters in through the nostrils, travels to the back of the throat, down into the lungs and abdomen expand, and then contract as the breath comes back up and out through the nose or mouth. Really feeling all of those sensations when the air goes into the nostrils, down into the lungs and abdomen expand, and then contract as the breath then comes back up and out through the nose or mouth. And allowing you now a moment in silence to focus in on your own particular rhythm of the breath coming in and the breath going out. Not breathing in any way differently, but just becoming aware of all the sensations associated with how you breathe normally. The breath coming in and the breath going out. And if the mind wanders, that's completely normal. It's only doing what a mind does, with a sense of kindness and compassion, bringing the focus, the attention back to the breath, back to the sensations of the breath coming in and the breath going out. And no matter how many times the mind wanders, each time, when you become aware, bringing it back right now to the present moment, and the focus, the attention on the breath coming in and the breath going out. And then, with the next in-breath, shifting the focus, the attention now down, as if the breath were being pulled all the way down through the torso, down through the legs, all the way to the feet. And when the focus of the attention reaches the feet, if you like, wiggle the toes to help you feel what's going on in this part of the body. What's going on in the feet right now? And if there's no particular sensations, then just allowing yourself to be okay with whatever sensations are arising in the feet right now. And if the mind wanders, then bringing the mind back to the focus, the attention here and now on the feet. And then when you're ready, we're going to shift the focus, the attention to where you're sitting. Where can you feel the attention maybe in the back of your legs, in the buttocks of where you're sitting on the chair right now? What can you feel in this part of the body? And if the mind wanders, that's absolutely fine. Just bringing the mind back to the here and now, to the focus of the attention on the part of the body where you're sitting on the chair. That might be the hips or the lower back or the buttocks or the thighs, any part of that body which is in contact with the chair. And if the mind wanders, then gradually bringing the mind back to wherever it had wandered off to the focus of the attention where it is, to the part of the body where you're sitting right now. And every time your mind wanders, gently with a sense of kindness, bringing it back. And then with the next in-breath, shifting the attention, focus the attention now to the hands. And your hands might be resting on your knees, or they may be on your lap. Feeling where your hands are right now. What's going on in this part of the body? What sensations are arising in the hands right now? Not wanting for things to be different, but just accepting whatever's going on in the hands right now. And if the mind wanders onto other things, treat it with a sense of kindness and just bring it back right now to the hands, to any sensations arising in the hands, whether they're placed on the lap or whether they're placed on your knees. Not wanting for things to be different, but just accepting and just seeing and exploring what sensations may be arising in that part of the body right now. And then as we come towards the end of the practice, just allow returning away from sensations in the body to returning to sensations associated with the breath. Feeling all of those sensations from when the breath enters in through the nostrils, travels down into the lungs and abdomen expand and contract. As the breath then passes back up and out through the nose or mouth. Having a moment in silence now to focus in on your own particular rhythm of the breath. And if the mind wanders, then gently bringing it back to the focus, the attention here and now on the breath. Remembering that the breath is always here to ground us and anchor us in the present moment, especially whenever things might become a bit rocky or a bit difficult. Always here to keep us fully present in the moment. And then gradually opening the eyes as we come back to full awareness of the room that we're in right now. So welcome back. Whenever we do a practice, we always do some inquiry. So please, it would be lovely to hear what your experiences was. I'm just going to model it as Lisa. Here are a few questions we ask. So while I'm sharing with Lisa, while I'm asking Lisa how she got on, if you want to put into the Q&A, you're more than welcome to put in how you found that practice, what was going on for you. Was there much mind wandering, or were you able to focus on the breath or the body, and what was going on for you? So Lisa, we did a slightly different version. I was conscious of time, so I did breath, and then I did the lovely practice that Chris Cullen, who's a brilliant mindfulness teacher, taught me, just feet, seat and hands, which I love. Slightly different from the one we normally do. So how did you find that?
Yeah, I had a very, very busy mind at the start. So my mind was jumping all over the place, things I need to do, what I'm going to have for tea tonight. It was all over the place, but I was able to bring it back following the instructions and really coming back to sensations of breathing. And as inevitably happens with me, after a while, I do sense that kind of calmness, just to keep coming back to the present moment. So yeah. So yeah, I feel better now than when I started. So thank you.
And I think the reason why I like doing this as an intro practice is that sometimes you're right, when our minds are very, very busy, even our breath, it can feel harder sometimes to anchor us. And sometimes doing the simple feet, seat and hands, and I know that the simple practices like that are different versions of that are used in kind of some of the mindfulness practices they do in schools, can be a very good way, because when you're actually having to shift that focus attention to something physical like your feet, and actually wriggling your toes can be a very good way of shifting that attention like that, I find. So yeah, I was the same, and also I was conscious that as I was doing it, my logic came back in, and I was aware, and I just thought, okay, I just accept that that's going on, that's fine. Unfortunately the wind slammed the door, and I was a bit like, do you know what, that's just okay, that's things that happen at the moment. So let's just have a look. I'm just having a look at the chat and just seeing people. Yes, the instructions are there, and guided practice is there to help people who might be new to this. So absolutely, the instructions help to bring us back, because our mind will wander, even for people who have been practicing mindfulness for 7 years. each of our practices can be different. And sometimes you might feel really good. Some people are saying that they're able to bring their attention back very quickly. Other people, someone's saying they're about getting annoyed with themselves and not doing it right. When you hear that more negative voice in your own mind, it's an invitation to go, am I being gentle and kind here? How can I be more gentle and kind? Don't be annoyed with yourself. Just it's natural to feel that. But when you start to be kinder and say, it's okay, I'm just learning something new, you go in with a growth mindset. You go in with a mindset that says, oh, this is the first time I've ever done it. Why should I beat myself up about it? Someone's saying about how it reminds them of 5 minutes to feel grounded again. Yes, it can just take that 5-10 minutes to ground us and anchor us in that present, that present moment. And there's lots of other different related therapies that people are saying that they're doing, and yes, and sometimes you might hear like your husband or your partner's voice and whatever, and when that attention wanders, then you bring it back. You bring it back each time. That's what we're invited to do, to keep coming back each time. And I'm just having a look at see what other questions have come in the Q&A. So just very quickly now, experience including parents. Yes, Lisa and I have run two of these courses now for teachers and parents. I think if in a school context, I think when a school is going to be looking to run a mindfulness program, and I'll talk about that in a moment, it's a good way to invite parents to come in and do a sampler too. I'm getting questions about how can you include mindfulness into your online teaching. Please remember what we've talked about, how it really must be delivered, ideally by practitioners who know and understand it. Really, really important there. There may be some free content you can draw on, and I'll talk to you about some of the stuff out there. So look, I'm going to, because we're almost up to time, some of the questions I've seen here are around about bringing mindfulness to your school. Let's do that, and I can talk finally about other providers. So if I come back to the slide deck, so creating a mindful school, because a lot of you are asking about that. It's really important if you are in a school and you really, you've liked what you've seen and you're really interested and you want to do it, then I think it's about getting the SLT involved, and you can show them this recording of this practice to really explain the neuroscience and psychology, what that underpins what we do, because some people don't fully understand that basis to it. They think it might be, is it slightly hippie? It's slightly a bit, what's this? When you give them the definitions and when you show them the neuroscience and psychology underpinning it and the evidence base behind it, then people start to sit up and take notice of it. If you want to roll out a proper mindfulness program, it's really important you find someone who has the right training and background. And if they're going to be training teachers, ideally, have they got a teaching background? Because they'll better understand you. If you're going to get them in to teach children, have they got a well-established mindfulness practice? And have they done the relevant teacher training program to deliver mindfulness to pupils, like the ones that Mindfulness in Schools in the UK, MIST, runs? And there will be other international organisations like that too. And it's something we're investigating in Pearson at the moment. They should have done an 8-week MBCT course or MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. They should have a year's personal practice and then done a good, well-recommended teacher training program. And you'll want to see, if you're going to get someone in to run that program, you'll want to see what evidence they have. What evidence can they give you of teacher training programs or pupil programs that they've run? And they need to demonstrate those core values of kindness, compassion, and being non-judgmental. In a little bit of how we're starting to incorporate mindfulness into products, I have written the mindfulness section of these two books, the revised GCSE revision planner, which gives an overview of some of the key concepts we've talked about today. And it's very much aimed at students who are around 16, which is when students sit their GCSEs in the UK. And obviously there's international GCSEs too. So it's very much written at that age range, with 3 meditations that we've recorded. They've got QR codes in them. It'll be very interesting just to see if you yourselves would be interested in an online mindfulness course. If you could just use the chat functionality, or just raise your hands in the chat functionality to give us a show of hands, that would be very much, we would be really interested just to get a sense of how many people would be interested in kind of the 4-week online course that I've created that's being sold currently in Italy. We recorded it in Italian and English. And we're looking to see if we can sell that more globally. So I'm seeing a good amount of hands raised up. So we'll see if ECIS are happy to provide. We can send out information about that. I'll check in with them about GDPR and all that data. I also run my own mindfulness and coaching practice and business. That's my own website there. You can contact me on LinkedIn, and there's my my Twitter handle as well. So I'm conscious that we're up to time. I'm just going to quickly, important question. Other than Oxford University, there are lots of different institutions. There are lots of different institutions, both university-based. In the UK, Oxford, Exeter, Bangor, Aberdeen, all big universities that have mindfulness kind of centres and places of teacher training programs. There are, like I said, MISP, Mindfulness in Schools Project, run a very good teacher training program in the UK, and they have, I think, some international affiliates. We ourselves at Pearson are going to be looking into this area here too. Hopefully you kind of have some good hints and tips of the kind of practitioners that you want to be getting, because on a local level, I'm sure if you do a Google search, you can kind of find that, you can find the right people too. Yes, I want to, and someone has just said, I think it's very important about you establishing your own mindfulness practice first before you look to then explore that with children, because mindfulness has to be something that is a lived experience, that we are in being mode. It's not something that's an academic pursuit. It is very much that lived in experience that then what someone can bring to that practice when they've been educated as a teacher. That's it, guys. I'm going to hand back to Georgie now, in case there are any final closing comments from her before we wrap up.
I'm not sure that's it, Ashley, is a good enough statement for that whistle-stop tour from yourself and Lisa. Genuinely, I went through the exercise myself, and I feel incredibly light and incredibly grounded, and I've had a sense of a resetting of myself. So I really, really appreciate this experience, and I'm sure that the attendees that have been able to join us today will also do so. And what we will be doing is actually sending out a recording afterwards, as I mentioned, of this presentation to everybody that registered. So if any of your colleagues weren't able to attend, then they can also go through that practice. And we'll also place that on our website. The other element, Ashley, is when we email that out, if you want to send me any links and things, I can certainly forward all of that information on to everybody as well, so that we can make sure that we're looking after ourselves, and ultimately, if we're in a good space, then that's only going to impact our students and our community in a much wider sense. This is actually a series of ECIS free webinars that we're running, and actually wellbeing's being a key theme that's run throughout many of our webinars. I just want to share with people that are with us at the moment that we've actually got one on Monday, the 8th of June, which is with Dr. Douglas Walker, and he's focusing on mental wellness and leading in a time of crisis. So again, about leadership. And then on the 16th June, we're joined by Kevin Hawkins and Amy Burke from Mindwell. Very similar sort of themes, and they're sort of trying to address the question about, during these times of disruption, how can we shift the focus of our schools towards greater wellbeing? So they again are free webinars. You're welcome to join us. If you visit the website as well, that will make sure that you can register for anything. And as I mentioned, we send recordings of all of our presentations as well out to you. But thank you so much, Ashley and Lisa. I'm sure our attendees would agree that this has been extremely insightful. I particularly love the fact that there is real science grounding around it and background, and it actually really gives it a sense of purpose. So yeah, absolutely, very, very thrilled with this. And I know that you're very busy people and you're under huge demand. So thank you to Pearson's for supporting you, being here today, and your time. And we look forward, we hope to be able to work with you all again in the future. So
lovely, thank you. It's been a real privilege for us. It's been really lovely to be here with all of you today. So thank you so much for allowing us to come along and to share this experience with you. And people, please feel free to keep in touch. I've given my contact details there, so please feel free. And keep well and healthy, everyone, please.
Absolutely.
Yes, take care, everyone.
Okay, have a great day, what's left of it. Thank you both.
Thank you very much. All the
Bye.
best.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. Bye bye.